Crash Bandicoot on the go. It's humbling to think back to a time when this idea was nothing more than a mere dream of mine. After Crash's run on the PS1, his exclusivity deal with PlayStation eventually came to an end, allowing the Bandicoot to go multiplat. While this can be remembered as a disappointing time for Crash fans to look back on, this move did, however, put Crash in front of a whole new generation of players. The shackles of Crash stuck on a singular home console were gone, and he can now be played on the same device that plays Pokemon and Mario games. That's a big deal. I love Crash on the Game Boy. I used to bring my black Game Boy Advance SP with me everywhere just to play these games. I'd take it on car rides, I'd sneak it into church, I'd take it to school if my mom didn't check my backpack. Could you blame me? There's something so natural about Crash's transition into 2D games. Unlike many platformers that were also shifting to handhelds at the time, there weren't as many concessions as you'd think there'd be. Crash's moves felt good, the levels are still as imaginative and on brand, and outside of a few quirks, these were still quality Crash adventures that have cemented themselves in the franchise. While I know it may sound dumb, but the same way Crash's console games left their mark on me, I still have quite a fondness for the Crash handheld games, and I would like to discuss that. So while we may have already gone over the Naughty Dog trilogy, in the next few videos of our retrospective series, I want to look at what I consider the Crash Game Boy trilogy in the same manner and see how some of my favorite games still hold up. You are watching a Crash Bandicoot Huge Adventure retrospective.
Let's take a stain. Observe the effect of a regular washing powder. Let's now observe the effect of super concentrated Crash Bandicoot XS on the same stain. Crash Bandicoot XS, it's pure Crash concentrate.
Crash Bandicoot Huge Adventure is unironically one of the most solid games in the franchise. It acts as a fun iteration of what it was like to play a Crash game at the time. A time before the series got a bit more imaginative in its post-Naughty Dog era. Given that this was the first game not on a Sony console, I find the game's focus to be a more vanilla version of Crash's gameplay to be very welcome. And just to cover my bases, yes, Huge Adventure is the first non-PlayStation Crash game. While Raptor Cortex did in fact come out on the PS2 before Huge Adventure did on the GBA, its Xbox and GameCube release would be months after Huge Adventures, meaning if you did not grow up with a PlayStation in your house, this was the first time you could get your hands on a Crash game. This was a brand new market of players who had probably only ever heard of Crash, so I am pleased Vicarious Visions took a more subtle approach when making this game. I personally view Huge Adventure as a marriage of what worked in Crash 2 and 3, jammed into a cartridge and ready to be taken on the go. There is so much brought up from the two games that playing Huge Adventure after playing the trilogy kind of feels like taking a brisk stroll through a Crash museum. It's so fun to just casually play this game because you feel so at home. Yeah, the game might fall into its familiar level settings a bit too soon and often. You go to jungles, sewers, and snow areas fairly routinely, but they look and play so much like their console counterparts that I don't even mind. It's a very safe attempt at the level structure, which of course is a good basis to play off of anyways. And since the level philosophy was tackled in a familiar direction, you can go into levels like Jungle Jam and see similar enemies and hear a familiar soundtrack and immediately go, yep, this is Turtle Woods from Crash 2. One trek through Frostbite Cavern or Snow Crash, and you can immediately discern you're basically in Snow Go with the addition of the Polar Chase section from Unbearable. It's actually uncanny how similar these levels feel to the console trilogy. And yes, Justin Slime and Just Hangin' is really just the eel deal again, so it's an obvious favorite. What I love most about these levels is that even if they are all repeats from the trilogy, they were designed in a way that lets them still have their own identity, even if that identity is only in a mechanical sense. When looking at the base structure of all the levels in this game, the sum of their quality is quite solid. I think they all managed to have a proper pace and a design that was at least decent enough for 2D. Crash levels are not foreign to 2D. It's been actually baked into their DNA since the beginning. This is the reason the entire game works so well, especially compared to other platformers making a similar shift. Many 3D platformers at the time took a big hit when shrinking down into 2D worlds for handhelds. Crash inadvertently doesn't really take this hit because 2D has always been a part of its level philosophy. 2D Crash was there for the first game, mostly used as a way to keep players from feeling overwhelmed by 3D platforming, since at the time it was such a novel concept. However, it was never used sparingly. 2D has always been a major part of the franchise. Bonus rounds have always been in 2D, and levels like Heavy Machinery and Native Fortress are extremely memorable. Heck, the Lost City is my favorite level in Crash 1, and it's fully 2D. They're not full levels, but I've always thought sections like Snow Go and Spaced Out used 2D to great effect in Crash 2, shifting perspectives back and forth. I even love Slippery Climb, if you could believe it, and that's basically a torturing device for some players. This Bandicoot was made in mind to be fun from both perspectives, and is pretty much the reason why I love this franchise so much. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I've always been impressed that Crash's formula works from any angle. I look at other platformers that had to make the reverse switch and jump from 2D to 3D, and I can only imagine what it must have been like to be forced to get acquainted with a different perspective. It makes me think about games like Mario 1 and Mario 64. Yeah, both of these games are Mario, and fun in their own ways, but none of that changes that one of these games is a 2D course-clear platformer, while the other is a 3D open-ended collectathon. Sure, both of these game styles work, but there would be a huge disconnect when jumping between the two. And that's exactly what happened to me. I played Mario 64 first growing up, then tried the original on my Game Boy and thought, something's not right. I just couldn't accept Mario 1 of all games because 64 had already shaped what I thought Mario was supposed to be in my mind. I've never had to deal with that with Crash because that core game philosophy is as sound as ever no matter where you played. I could just play Crash Warped at home, pick up my Game Boy with Huge Adventure in it, and I know I still had what felt like the full Crash Bandicoot package with me. Handheld and Crash fits like a glove, and these levels personify that brilliantly. I mean, obviously it's not without its flaws. Since levels can't jump between perspectives the way the console games do, much longer levels do tend to end up feeling pretty one-note. Final Countdown I think is really cool. Unfortunately, the level just would not end, and you already know how I feel about long Crash levels. Thematically, it's actually the best level in the game, as you are making it through Cortex's space station right before the last boss. I love the Future Frenzy vibe they used mixed with the space backdrop. It has such a strong sense of finality. Visually, the game looks quite good. Colors are vibrant and the sprite work is as high quality as a Gen 3 Pokemon game. I adore Crash's sprite work. It is a perfect recreation of Crash's model from 2 and 3. Animations also really help this game stick the landing. Every jump, spin, slide, and body slam is really faithful to Crash's moveset. It's quite impressive. Not sure why, but if you can get Crash's standing and breathing animations down, I already like your game a bit more. I don't know, I'm weird like that. This visual quality was no doubt in part to Universal Interactive working in tandem with Vicarious Visions and Red Eye Studios to recreate Crash Bandicoot in this form, with Universal actually giving the team some of their original animations and textures from Crash Warped, which is why most assets in the game look pretty faithful. I really can't express how much of a difference this move must have made in development, and the results show in spades. The backdrop of worlds look very on brand. I guess there is a case to be made that some of them could be a little busy, like in the jungle levels. But I think this aesthetic has always worked best with Crash, and colors pop in a way that you never get lost with anything in the background. I just know that without Universal's guidance, development and the end result could have been much worse. I also like to think this helped the team in picking out what they wanted to bring up from the games prior. I don't know about you, but I always loved how swimming made it into this game. The underwater caverns are fittingly restrictive. I love the bright colors and how it's kind of an inverse compared to the console games in that way. I think these sections still work as good pace breakers. However, even I'll admit swimming levels sometimes felt like I was just on a ride. You go down, left, right, up, and down so much in these samey water hallways that I couldn't even remember where I was. I actually died somewhere in the middle of one of these levels and came back to a checkpoint and could not for the life of me remember which way I was supposed to go. It took me making it back to the beginning of the level for me to realize I had gone the wrong way. I'm not saying this wouldn't be possible in a level like Deep Trouble, but swimming's biggest drawback is how similar it all looked. Not like I was expecting much. I do not require vicarious visions to force the jet sub into these tiny hallways. That'd be ridiculous. I'm actually impressed that the swimming is here at all. It very surprisingly controls pretty well. The movement is snappy, and you don't really get affected by the flow of water as much as you do when warped. It's hard to be really upset at a vehicle that controls well, given the franchise's reputation for having a ton of them that don't. And speaking of which, not sure if you'll want to hear this, but I do like the vehicles in this game. Even though by this time, Crash fans would have most likely been fatigued by their inclusion, you couldn't really call this game the full package without them. For better or worse, Crash games do have vehicles in them, and when they're done right, I think they're pleasant. Realistically, Huge Adventure handles vehicles better than Warp did. Crash games always flow better when you're working with a smaller number of vehicles. Not including the swimming, you really are just jumping back and forth from Polar and the jetpack. I think Polar rides are fine enough. While I am impressed by the existence in another chase and vehicle level mix, the rides kinda depend on how well you can deal with them. I love that this does in fact make the snow levels as dynamic as they were in Crash 2. It's just that the novelty wore off much quicker. Running from whatever this thing's biggest downside is that you have to dash or it will catch you. It's not quite the auto-scroller like the chases are in the mainline games. They really force you to pump the gas a bit more. Unfortunately, that may leave you open to die from any of the many obstacles on the course. There can be so many things to avoid, and you kinda have to react pretty quickly to get over this stuff. A line of penguins or simply a wall will insta-kill you. And I don't know if it's just me, but it was really hard to judge when I needed to jump. Depth perception has never been a strong suit of mine, and dealing with all of this while also trying to break every crate was a bit more taxing than I remember. I was struggling. I kind of liked that I was struggling though. I play the console games pretty often, so chases haven't really been a challenge for me in a very long time, and Huge Adventure was kicking my butt. The jetpack is now an auto-scroller. Now, usually losing the ability to control something outright and replacing it with an auto-scroller section would normally be considered cheap. However, I really like the jetpack sections like this. It's like a blend of the jetpack and airplane levels from Warp, and it played out to be a decent shooter minigame. I think the levels might run a little longer than I like, but with every blimp being a checkpoint, messing up or missing a box wasn't met with such a harsh punishment as you'd think there'd be. It's kinda weird, but the jetpack in the Game Boy game might be more sound than the console uses of it. I mean, you guys know I adore the jetpack in 2, but that's not the common sentiment for most people. I'm not saying these levels were 10 out of 10s or anything, but they were at least fun enough that I was actually looking forward to them when they popped up. Realistically, if the Cortex fight in Crash 2 played slightly similar to this, I wouldn't even have been mad. So I consider this vehicle a success. Well, not as big of a success as the last one. You only use it once, but the motorcycle hovercraft is probably the coolest Crash vehicle to date. As much as I played this game growing up, I actually never used this one as a kid because I can never find the area that hides it. So imagine me actually grinning like a child again playing this for the first time for this playthrough. Yeah, it's just another auto-scroller, but it's so cool. It's like everything cool about the motorcycle and jetpack smashed together and you still get the biker Crash skin. It's so awesome. Genuinely might be the best vehicle in the franchise off the cool factor alone. I know that might sound a bit shallow, but for someone who mains Biker Crash and CTR, yeah, I need more of this type of energy in my Crash games going forward. Toys for Bob, please take notes. Why this was never brought to a console game, I will never understand. It really bumps up the game presentation having random set pieces like this. And as for the presentation, I think the game is charming. Even though the opening story quite literally uses screenshots from Warp, I think it's enough to get the point across. Another yelling from Uka Uka for Cortex as he unveils his newest machine that will shrink the Earth down into the size of a grapefruit, tasking Crash with gathering the world's crystals again to power Coco's machine that can revert the Earth back to proper size. It's a bite-sized premise, even for a Crash story. There are still things I like about it though. Cortex addressing the entire planet is pretty cool. I would love to see a moment like this voiced in the series, since it feels like he's only ever talking to Crash or his henchmen. A scene that actually makes Cortex a global threat would actually go so hard on a console game. Here on the GBA, however, that's about as far as the concept goes. Even though there's a literal shot of Cortex holding the Earth in his hands, you deal with him in a pretty normal and casual manner. This game is a 20 crystal run to Cortex with a fairly normal progression ladder. Even though the planet you're standing on has shrunk, that premise doesn't end up affecting you all that much. You still go to each area, fight normal enemies, hunt for crystals, and get the heck out of there. It plays out so much more tame than you think, given some of these story shots. Growing up, I remember having the impression I was going to go up against giant enemies or something. That was probably from me just being in love with the box art of this game, however. Cortex towering over Crash gave me this more foreboding expectation of what the game was actually going to be. Though I did, even back then, always find it strange that while Cortex was shrinking down the Earth, he decided to also shrink down his own henchmen along with himself. It just never made much sense. It's fine, it's a story that only runs skin deep, but I think even this story has a bit of potential for a more fleshed out Crash adventure. Obviously, that was never the goal here. This is a Crash game, you're not really here for that. You want the good stuff, the gem collecting, the power-ups, the secret areas. Yeah, it's all pretty solid. Gems struck a fairly decent balance this time around. They weren't too hard to collect, but the game made sure to keep me on my toes with some crate placements. It wasn't ridiculous or anything, but there were still times where backtracking was expected, like in Final Countdown. An extra life crate is guarded by some nitros. However, that extra life crate is placed just high enough from the nitro that blowing them up with a nitro detonator wouldn't actually break the crate for you. I guess my Crash literacy is high enough for this type of stuff. One look at this situation, then also noticing the awkwardly placed bounce crates that can just so help you get back to this higher area in the level, and I knew what was up. It's funny because I used to hate the idea of backtracking, but the more the devs plan for it by designing the level around it, it's actually kind of fun to piece together situations like this. I feel like it almost became a Crash staple at one point, and it's a fairly good way to keep players on their toes. The nitro detonator and down in the hole was hidden in a very funny place. I actually chuckled when I saw it, and this is after I had beaten the level and could not find this thing. This is some Crash 4 type placement, but for some reason it didn't come off as obnoxious to me. There were also times when you would need to jump over the end of the level or bonus round platform to get the remaining boxes, and I thought that was a fun way to trick the player in the parameters the game has. I mean, it sucked to realize this standing on the platform because it was too late to go back, but I think because of the decent pace of the levels, I wasn't too mad when having to replay these sections because the game had gotten one over on me. I think this definitely made the hunt for the color gems more palatable, as you had to literally find them in levels. Since there is a low number of challenge areas in the game, the color gems are kinda just floating in places instead of being placed at the end of each death route. That's not really a bad thing, since I still managed to leave levels and forget I was even supposed to be looking for them at all. You often need to stop and look up at a metal crate in the air and get curious, which is something that kinda reminds me of secrets in Crash 2. Obviously, this Game Boy game will not be expected to have the same degree of secrets like the console games do, so I was completely fine with making these big jumps over to wherever the gems were. The green gem actually reminded me of Crash 3 Deep Pressure. You need to find the trigger crate, then backtrack for the gem. A gem, mind you, that is hiding off screen at the beginning of the level, so it could be an easy miss. I can say that because, yeah, I missed it originally. It seems like no matter how many Crash games I play, I still fall for the oldest tricks in the book, and it makes it even funnier because these aren't even the original Crash developers. I love this franchise. Like I said, I never really had a problem replaying a level to get a gem because while the levels were paced nicely, I also really like how Crash felt to control, especially come late game. Though this is a GBA game, Crash's movement is almost a one-to-one to the console games. There is a slight discrepancy with jump inputs, however. Not sure if it's just me, but I found myself walking off ledges when pressing the jump button. But I can count the times this accident happened on my hands, so it wasn't a big deal. For the most part, jumps felt really good, and since sliding made it into the game, I found myself crouching and slide jumping as much as I would in any Crash game. I know it probably would have felt awkward on the GBA, but if they could have added a glitch high jump somehow, it would have been perfect. I mean, it probably would have been a bit redundant since power-ups are in this game, and to no one's surprise, they are a fantastic addition to the gameplay. You can't really go wrong with the super body slam, double jump, tornado spin, and speed shoes. Of course, the body slam is about as useless as it always is. I appreciate that they were able to animate the move in a similar fashion, but it still doesn't really do anything other than take up a chunk of your time whenever you need to body slam, which, like always, isn't too often. The double jump plays out about as you'd expect, quite literally making Crash an even bigger joy to platform with, while the tornado spin actually has taken a hit in quality. I don't know if this is a Game Boy restraint or just made wrong, but Crash descends immediately on the first frame of using the move, so you feel like you need to get even higher than normal to land where you want. This actually made getting the gold gem a real chore because I kept overestimating Crash's initial jump. I retried this big jump so many times it wasn't even funny. The move still works well enough, I just needed to pay more attention when using it, which, given the fact that the tornado spin is my favorite Crash move of all time, was a bit disappointing. Speed shoes, however, were spot on, and just like in Warp, made relic collecting a solid post-game activity. I find it admirable that Vicarious Visions went for relics at all. For the most part, the levels do fit the mold for speedruns, and I had a lot of fun going for gold and platinum times. The runs did feel less prepared than normal, however. You could tell that relic runs were probably the last thing worked on. The number of actual time crates during runs was surprisingly very low. You often go long distances in between before actually breaking one, which directly makes every time crate you do find even more important than normal. Not a terrible thing, however, since relic times are so forgiving in this game. I got so many platinum relics on runs that would have normally been gold at best. Which I do agree is good since there are so many moments in this game where slowing down is technically the best way to speed up. Relics could have been much worse in this game than they ended up being, and it's not like they even went unscathed to begin with. I guess the problem I'm alluding to isn't just in relic runs. The problem actually goes mechanically deep. The fixed camera on Crash is so zoomed in on his every move, it makes it hard to play sometimes. You can really tell this aspect of the game wasn't really taken into account of because it affects you almost all the time. Much more of what I would consider the trickier platforming of this game came from tiny platforms that would often leave the screen as Crash leaps in the air. This happens all throughout this game. You're in the air, the camera is zoomed in on Crash, and you can't see where you're landing. You have to literally gauge where to land Crash with your own mental ruler. This is worse when platforms are moving, which is very often in this game. In this one particular spot in Ruin's bonus round, you have to body slam on time with the moving platform, and I really hated it because you couldn't see anything. And in some places, the developers just set a bunch of enemies and hazards on the ground in places where you'll definitely be too high up in the air to discern where you'll want to land, and I don't know why. They place these enemies just to catch you on your way down. It's so dumb. This one bonus round requires you to tornado spin over a chasm, but you can't see anything beneath you. I had to just die a couple of times and learn where I wanted to land because if I wanted all the boxes, I needed to backtrack. This kind of stuff was so frustrating, especially during relic runs. It is significantly harder being rushed and having to react in an instant to things that haven't come in your field of view yet. If there's one place the benefit of 3D showed its face the most, it's right here. It's taken for granted, but being able to see what's coming ahead in relic runs to mentally prepare yourself really does make all the difference. It's so nerve-wracking just blindly speedrunning in this game and hoping you react to whatever hazard that's going to pop up next. Sometimes I will literally just do a double jump into a tornado spin and hope I land it somewhere safe. I know that's not the best way to deal with a problem like this, but it was better than just running into some of the more annoying enemies in this game. Which is weird because enemies have never really been a worry in Crash games. They've kinda just been there to break up the pace. You'd think I could just say that trend continues in Huge Adventures since the majority of the enemies are just repeats from the console games, and for the most part, those are all fine. Unfortunately, the two new enemies actually made me want to rip my hair out. The blow dart shooter enemies are so awful. They're designed to shoot at you almost before they even appear on screen. You better believe this led to my death on many occasions. Also, generally, their sprite work is really bad. They almost blend into the background. I can't see them half the time, which means from my perspective, Crash would just die out of nowhere. There's a death route in Temple of Boom with no checkpoint that is filled with these guys, and it was so painful. Blow dart shooters are placed in the most random spots, and you get almost no time to react. It got to the point where I just had to memorize their location so I could jump out of the way in time. Let it be known that there is a lot of waiting for platforms in this death route, so dying randomly and having to restart this section, not fun. Seriously, screw these guys. The frog enemies aren't technically new. Frogs were definitely memorable in Warp, but the way the frogs in this game act is completely exclusive and a new brand of annoying. They just hop into frame out of completely nowhere and kill you. Again, time trials dealing with these guys was so painful. It's almost like a jump scare when they hop directly on you. I understand the want for interesting types of enemies. Outside of these two annoying ones, all the other enemies are kinda just there. You deal with them the same way you would in the trilogy. I don't think that's particularly wrong, however. I much prefer when enemies are really just imaginative and fun, but making them this unfair for cheap kills, I'm not a fan of. Thankfully, there was another set of enemies I was much more a fan of. Bosses in this game were about on par with how Crash bosses usually are. There was also a greater emphasis on vehicle usage during fights, which can always be a lot more interesting. Not saying it makes a great fight, but battling Dingodile in scuba gear is surprising at least. Though it does seem like a cruel joke to put a pyromaniac underwater, he was always fighting at a disadvantage here. Seriously, where is his flamethrower? The engine fight is no joke how I would have preferred a jetpack boss fight to go. Crash 2's biggest blunder is still the Cortex chase. I will never let it go. Obviously, this is another marriage of 2 and 3. It pretty much mimics Coco and Engine's fight in space, but gives Crash a chance this time. I'm starting to realize Engine mech suit fights have always been good no matter what game. He's Cortex's right-hand man for a reason. Tiny's fight also ended up the same way, pretty much an infusion of his past fights. It's a bit expected now that the devs seem to only know one way to deal with Tiny, and that's just waiting for him to chill out a bit so Crash can hit him. It's fine because I love Tiny, but I do wish that some of his fights could have gotten a bit more fleshed out in some ways. He's not terrible, he will always be my favorite boss character, but I do wish there was a bit more. It was also really weird how the boss themes were just placed wrong. Dingodile, Engine, and Tiny's boss themes have just randomly been shuffled around. I'm not sure what they were going for with this move. I honestly just feel like someone put the songs in wrong. But hey, you get to fight Tiny to Dingodile's theme, so that's something. It doesn't take anything away from these admittedly okay bosses. Unfortunately, Cortex's fight doesn't really fall in with this bunch. It might be on par with his jetpack chase, it's just not good. I would be hard pressed to call this a fight in the first place. I think it's a good allegory for Crash and Cortex's relationship, however. I can very much see an animation where Cortex will destroy his entire lab trying to get Crash. Even though he's a genius, the moment Crash is thrown into the picture, he literally loses all train of thought. It would make a fantastic Looney Tunes skit, which is kind of the essence of Crash. In that way, this boss fight works. However, actually playing it out is kind of boring. Dodging basic patterns from Cortex, then standing in front of his generator until he very slowly shoots it? Nah, no thanks. The Mega Mix chase, however, is much more of a proper finale for the game. You have to collect everything to unlock this last run, and that does include all the relics, but I do appreciate the effort in it. It felt like something out of a Metroid game, this last-ditch effort to make it off the ship in time while this horrible creature chases you. And it's pretty funny. Kind of a charming way to end off this literal pocket-sized adventure. You can't really be mad at Huge Adventure. Overall, this game is extremely sound. It's quite impressive how naturally this game slots into the franchise. It's like playing the light version of Crash 2 and 3. There really wasn't anything like this game at the time. Crash Bandicoot on the go in 2002 was really a treat, and I still remember it fondly. It holds up today, especially as a post-Naughty Dog game. And while it didn't really go for anything new or revolutionary, its goals were more to be in line with what was already working in the franchise. As a first for the Game Boy, I think it's incredibly solid. I could see this game getting people into the trilogy at the time, or any of the newer console games that were starting to come out in the 2000s. Even though Huge Adventure came out in a pretty weird time for the franchise, I think this release was important. Naughty Dog might have been long gone, but I think this title shows that other people could in fact make Crash games. This game was a beacon of hope for the most awkward time for Crash, and I'm happy Vicarious Visions took a very grounded approach. To me, it shows that the team was willing to take their time with Crash and understand what makes the game so special. And I believe they were able to take what they learned here and set the stage for an even more ambitious entry on this handheld.